everybody back here to the Martin E. Segal Theater Center at the Graduate Center CUNY at the City University of New York. It's week 18, I think, if I'm not right. And as part of our talk to artists and writers and thinkers, theater artists around the world in New York City, the US. And today we have with us a very great guest, a philosopher from France. It is the great Jacques Rancière, who is with us here. So thank you so much for joining us in this unprecedented time. And yeah, it is still complicated here in America. Numbers of cases are up. Over 4 million people are infected. The Center for Disease Control thinks it's up to 50 million. That's the real number. Over 40 million people, 45 million filed for unemployment at a certain time. It's actually running out by the end of the month, and they are now thinking, should be continued or not. It's a disastrous time. Also eviction, the protection for eviction is running out. People will be forced to leave homes, and it is just a recipe for disaster. It's as someone said, a disaster movie we are perhaps living in and ourselves, and there's a big distrust in government. There's no real security for jobs or distrust in the workplace. It is extremely hard confinement. So of course, this is a dangerous time. There's lots of civil unrest for good reasons in the streets in Seattle and Portland, and there's paramilitary force used against protesters. And all of it is just a stunning development and missing leaderships of a president who still kind of refuses to wear a mask. So we don't really know where it all will going. New York, everything is closed. In Midtown, where our university is, every second store is closed, every restaurant is closed, just on the sidewalks people are sitting. And so it's a bleak outlook, even so it's a sunny, wonderful summer day. We have with us Jacques Rancière today, and most people do know him, who know him. I'll just make some very brief remarks. He is born in Algeria, and philosophy is his field. Political philosophy, philosophy of education, on the aesthetics. Many think of him as one of the most influential philosophers of the times we live in, and I agree. And he worked a lot on the history and thought from below, from the people, the workers. He thinks about radical equality and equal intelligence of people. And when it comes to art, which he also comments on, and we think of him as an artist in his writing, he thinks that art is a radical action against hierarchies in society, or it makes visible that existing hierarchies. And he wrote the significant piece for the theater world, The Emancipated Spectator, where he's looked at who looks and who acts. And he said, if I say it right, that looking actually is the opposite of knowledge. And perhaps we do a transmission of ignorance, and we don't do a real service. We don't take the spectators for serious, and that perhaps is something that could be changed. But like all of us, Jacques also is living through the time of Corona. So where are you right now, Jacques? What time is it?
So I am in in French provinces in Brittany near the sea. It's now 6 p.m. You know, in my place. You know, but it's not hot at all. You know, it's rather windy and rainy. It's a gray day, but I'm fine.
Yeah, and we just read today, I think, that also in the Bretagne, some small towns, sea towns, had to close down again. Even so, France opened a bit the restrictions.
Yes, you know, well, it's a bit ambiguous because, yes, you know, so there was in France, you know, the end of the confinement, the end of the lockdowns, you know, but at the same time, you know, there are new cases, you know, so it seems that the pandemic is coming back, you know, and especially in some regions like for instance, Brittany, regions where, so it's difficult to know exactly why, of course, because there are regions, near the sea, so regions for vacation, and so of course, people say, oh, it's because of the tourists, who come, etc., etc. But mostly it seems it is because, of course, people, coming from all the country, gather, the families, are gathering, and seeing again, after some months of separation. So the fact is, so that there is no more any confinement, but at the same time, I'm in one region which is supposed to be a bit dangerous,
Yeah.
but not so much, I'm not afraid.
You're not afraid. That's good.
I'm not afraid, and people are not afraid, but of course they wear masks, they, of course, they take care. So, well, it's rather, peaceful situation. It's a region where there was absolutely nothing, during the confinement, almost no case at all, and it started just now.
Really? Yeah. So where were you when it all happened, when it started, the confinement?
Oh, I was in Paris, when it started, and while I was doing the kind of things I always do, I always do, meaning working, meaning so well, I would say that most of my life consists in well, reading, writing, sometimes gardening. So it was impossible to, of course, to do gardening during that moment, But and also it was impossible to go to the library. Of course, I used to go to the National Library almost every day. And of course I was at home. So, but on the other hand, I'm a rather, quiet person, spending much time, just, in front of my desk, just reading, writing, and also I could go on, and of course all the more because there were no more seminars, no more talks, no more public events. So I was peacefully, reading and writing at home.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, a continuation of your normal days, except the teaching.
I don't teach anymore. I left university 20 years ago. So I am a retired person. But what at the same time, of course, I was active. But during the last time I've decided, now I will try, to slow down all those activities of talking and seminars and so on. And of course, in a way, the pandemic helped me, of course, to do so. Well, so, well, no, the point is at the same time, I'm so I spend much time, at home. But I'm not a metaphysician, I don't work just in my mind, with concepts, I work with words, with the words written by other people, with archives, with images, and so on. And of course, it was a lack for me, because of course most there were many texts, many images I could not see during that period, And of course, it's kind of restriction, of my activity.
So how did it feel for you, that experience of confinement, of a lockdown?
Of course, it is a strange experience. Of course, it is the first time in my life, and it's a long life, I know this kind of thing, Well, in a way, I was prepared by my way of life, of course. But at the same time, I think it's, well, for me, it was a kind of time of suspension, And at the same time, I could go on, doing mostly the same kind of things, I'm doing all the time. But well, it was a time of suspension, meaning you are no more, in the normal course of things, in the normal course of time, And well, for me, it's important, also from an intellectual point of view, because there are many people, who want to explain everything, something unexpected, happens, but they can turn the things, so that it was expected, you know. There are the reasons for this, and of course, since the beginning of the pandemic, there were a lot of texts, you know, written by intellectuals saying, oh, of course, it was inevitable. It is the consequence of capitalism, of the Anthropocene, etc., of our way of dealing with nature, of the technical mastery of the word, etc., you know. I don't like this kind of attitude. I think that when something unexpected comes, you know, you must leave it unexpected, you know. So this could not have happened, you know. I think for me it's important because most of my thinking, you know, is about contingency, you know. So I decided, well, it happens. I have no mastery, you know, over this event, you know. I don't know what happens in the hospitals, you know. I know that there are people dying in France, you know. The fact is that well, most of them, you know, live in suburbs that are not you know, the same place, you know. Of course, I cannot go into the hospital, so I'm far from everything. So let us really, you know, well. You know, be honest. Let us be honest. You know, we have no mastery. We don't know what happens. We don't see what happens. You know, so I think we should not try, you know, to explain what happens and to say this is the result of a long trend of civilization, etc., of a long history. Yes, so that's my way of thinking, which means that you know, well, after a few days, you know, I stopped, you know, reading anything of the pandemic. You know, so I decided, oh, I don't know, you know. I must act, you know, as a person who doesn't know, you know, and don't and not, you know, not really get you know, trapped, you know, in this kind of constant, you know, discussion and explanation and debate, you know, about things that you don't know.
Yeah, I think that's quite a significant thought, that we do not know, and so that so many people try to explain and maybe perhaps reflecting more their own thoughts and what reality is. So, but for you, do you feel that this is a completely new time? If you say, I do not know, can you see connections to history, to times that were perhaps connected to the moment we live through now?
Well, of course, it's true that at the same time, it's a moment of suspension. This is a moment when people cannot really gather and discuss and act together, you know. And of course, it is in this kind of moment, you know, what happens, I would say, is a kind of enforcement, you know, of consensus, because of what consensus means, you know, is the idea that there is only one reality and one way of thinking of that reality and dealing with that reality, you know. And it is, of course, the ideology of our governments, you know. There is only one reality, there is only one thing to do. And of course, you know, in normal times, we can say no. There are a lot. We can perceive differently. We can name the things differently, the situations differently. We can really put the case differently. But, well, in this case, it's quite difficult, but it's quite impossible, you know. So you know, of course, there were some people saying you know, no, it's nothing, just you know, just a small flu, you know, etc. And it's horrible for our governments, you know, to decide, you know, confinement and lockdown and so on. But at the same time, you know, there was no action, you know, against the government, you know. In fact, we agreed, you know, we agreed, in fact, you know. So I think it's a very interesting and of course dangerous time, because it is a time when we are obliged, you know, to abide to the law of consensus, to the idea that Well, of course, and of course we know that the government was wrong. We know, for instance, that in France, the situation is a consequence, of the shortage, of course, of equipment, of research, etc., etc. It's a result of a lot of cutbacks, etc. But at the same time, when the government says, why you have to stay at home, if you don't want to be infected or infect other persons. What can we say? What can we say? What else can we say? And what else can we do? So we can say, of course, the government is responsible for the situation, but we can do anything, And I think for me it's significant because many people in these kind of situations say, oh, it's really the proof that we are in a kind of totalitarian form of biopower, society of surveillance, etc. So some kind of big brother. But obviously not precisely. It's not big brother. The government is not really surveying us. It doesn't survey anything in a way. But at the same time, well, we obey. We obey. In a way, we obey not because the government is strong, but because it is weak.
Yeah, I think a German director from the Volksbühne, Frank Castorf, said, I don't like that. Our chancellor is telling me I have to wash my hands. He said, I'm a grown-up person, but on the other hand, he has to. So, and it is not an easy adjustment. For you in that time, as you said, also in your life, because this is the first period of such a long confinement. Did it produce some thoughts, some thinking? Did something materialize or interest that you didn't have before?
I would not say so. And as I said, I went on, working on the same kind of things. I was working before, mainly on aesthetics and working on images, so writing about films, about photographs, about installations, and so on. Well, but I would say it made me perhaps perceive more than in any time, a certain futility, of this constant, explanation and comment, of the event. So I think with this multiplicity, of articles every day, there were a lot of articles, explaining the situation. Well, and I had really the feeling, but it's not the first time in my life, but more than ever, the feeling that there is a kind of complicity, between those governments, that are managing, things, on a day-by-day basis, and those intellectuals, trying to put everything, within the scope, of history, of many centuries, a history of humankind, history of capitalism, etc., etc. So I had really there was a kind of course of perception that was stronger than ever, but it is really useless, and there is a kind of illusion, of people thinking that they are commenting, explaining, denouncing things, but at the same time, I think they will just accompany, what is done by our governments, Well, but of course, it's rather negative lesson, of course not. Well, what I think understood better, better than ever, is that. Well, there is a kind of normal order of things, and those denounce this order of things also are part of this order of things, and so it of course it's a challenge, but what can we do? What can we do else, but praying feeling, better feeling our impotence, in some circumstances, or the limits of our power,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That there are limits, and especially I think in America, where which has a view of exceptionalism, and things will not happen here and everything is the best and the perfect. It is perhaps a first time that there the feeling of insecurity, that the certain future is uncertain, really happen here. So you said you're looking at images and installations. What were you looking at in this time? What were the images you worked on?
So if I try to remember, first I had to write a text, for a catalog, for an exhibition of the Chilean artist Alfredo Jar, because he was given a prize recently, and there will be an exhibition, and Alfredo Jar spent a lot of time trying to make political images, and especially, of course, images, of the slaughter, in Rwanda, and so there will be an exhibition. So and of course, it is a new opportunity to think, what exactly does it mean? Does it mean, to make photography, in a political way, how to manage, with all those corpses, all those dead bodies, and for instance, but Alfredo Jar, precisely never showed any dead body, any corpse, or in a massacre, for instance. So I spent time, looking at the image, of his work, for some dozens of years now, and trying to think, about it, about what can an artist exactly do, and after a while, after that, I for instance, but I will not, tell my whole life, but I wrote an article, about a film by the Portuguese filmmaker Pedro Costa. Pedro Costa made a lot of films, with not about, but really with, a group of migrant workers, coming from Cape Verde, near Lisbon. And what is interesting is that it is not, documentary work. He worked with them, and made them and helped them, or made them, become really not simply people telling their life, but people playing their life again, and becoming actors, playing their own life, and of course, what interests me, is this kind of image also, is an interesting way of raising the the whole issue, of political art and political film, especially, because we all know that there is this old slogan that you should not aestheticize, misery. You should not aestheticize, people living in those conditions. And the fact is, that Pedro Costa makes really beautiful images, beautiful images with these people, really living in a kind of underworld, in the suburbs of Lisbon. And so I had also to write on his last film, who is about, a woman coming, coming from Cape Verde after the death of her husband, and testifying not only, the situation of those workers, but also testifying to the situation of those women, who are left alone, so in Africa. And of course, their husbands, their companions, tell them, okay, I come, I take a job, I build a house, and next year you come, but no. In fact, they lose their jobs. They don't build houses, except some kind of barracks in shanty towns, and the women never come. They stay at home with the children, etc. And the film is about these women, arriving in this shanty town in Lisbon, where he's his husband, spent many years, leaving her, in Africa, Well, and it's about, at the same time, kind of giving a voice, to those women, because they are not only, the poor people, the poor migrants, but there are also, poorer than the poor migrants, their wives, left at home. So at the same time, it's about her, really living, inhabiting, the house of the dead, and so with this kind of, at the same time, it's a trial and also a form of reconciliation, Well, so I wrote, about this, and after, I had to write about a collection of photographs, made about, the so-called jungle, in Calais, meaning the place, where migrants, so were in camps, trying to go to England to cross the channel. So, and it was also the same thing, how do you represent, the situation, and not simply as a situation, of poor migrants, but also as testifying to a certain form of life, So this is the kind of things, I did, during those times.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about the photographer not showing the dead bodies. And we also had artists here, African American Black artists, who said the showing of the body of the killing of George Floyd, the endless repeating of that video, whether that is really the right choice, of representing that reality.
Well, yes, no, there are, well, of course, there are many things, there are many things, Well, in the case of George Floyd, well, there is, the issue whether, it's a right thing, to represent a corpse, and also, of course, the side question, whether white people, can represent, the body of a dead black man, which is another issue. Well, but yes, but certainly, well, unfortunately, the time of massacres, is not over, and this kind of issue, of course, is coming again.
From your experience in life, from your research, your writing, thinking, and observing the time what we in the US are experiencing, do you feel, from what you can tell, is it a moment of change in the history of a country?
You mean in the US?
Yes.
Well, of course, I see it. I see it from afar, But of course, what is striking, in the history of the US, that there was this time of the 60s, this time of the civil rights, etc., where one had the impression, that really a time was over, but there was a kind of democratic movement, that could not be stopped, and that any step, backward was impossible, But there have been so many steps backward, since that time, and well, and sometime, but of course, I don't live in United States, I think the longest, the longest perhaps period, was in the United States. It was never more than 2 months, so I cannot say I know the country, But at the same time, we have the impression, sometimes that we see in the United States some kind of movement back, to some dark times, sometimes. So I was rereading, some books by Jack London, so recently, and that at some moment, I think, yes, we are, we are again, or we are still perhaps, in those times, where, well, the life, precisely, the life of a person doesn't matter so much, So of course, Black Lives Matter, is very important, but at the same time, there was a time in the United States where even white lives, did not matter when they were the lives of people struggling for their rights, and of course, so in this situation, I always remember, those trade unionists who were killed, for a long time in the United States. It was a way of dealing with the social question, just killing, those who rebelled. So sometimes, we have this feeling, that the land of progress, the land of civil rights, etc. And at the same time, is also it still has something, of a land of brutality, and but I see it from afar. But of course, certainly, of course, presidents like Trump, of course, encourage, of course, the revival, of this atmosphere of violence, in which, after all, a life doesn't matter so much, and of course, most particularly, black life. Well, so, but again, I see it from afar, and of course, I feel very important, the movement, of course, against this state of things, and at the same time, there is something a bit terrifying, in the idea of a history that is repeating, and not moving forward. But I hope that better days will come. But certainly they will come, or they will come only because of the struggle, of movements like Black Lives Matter. And the movement that happened today, like in Portland, for instance.
When it comes to art, and in a way, of course, it's always political. What do you think, from your perspective, from your thinking, in the time we live in? How should art, or what could art do, and how should it react? What is the effective way?
Well, first, I would say that, from my point of view, it's not a good way, to raise a question, to ask what art should do or must do, because art really covers so many different things, So I rather, this is the first point, and the question is not to what art must do. Art must not do anything special, But of course, there are artists, who are engaged, in an egalitarian, perspective, and of course, for me, the problem is not what art, what they must do, but what they can do, and what they can do. First, I would say, I'm not at ease with the idea, that you must, really give an answer to an immediate situation, and of course, if artists, are required, to help, for instance, the doctors to help, say, okay, to help the doctors, the nurse, etc. But that's okay, But I don't think, because art, it takes time. It takes time. You cannot say, oh, there is a pandemic and we have to do something, to really to write a play, to make some kind of performance, and of course a performance, a performance online, is always something a bit bizarre. But I think. It always takes time, to really become aware of what the situation, bears in it, and to construct a form of response, you know. So my idea is, well, artists, you know, are more interested, you know, in the egalitarian struggle, you know, or who are committed to the equality of intelligence, you know. Well, and also know, you know, that you don't really answer, you know, immediately a situation. So you try to construct, you know, some form of word, you know, some kind of egalitarian connection, you know, between words and images and movements, you know. Well, it's it's a research, you know. You try, you know, to go against the consensus, meaning against, you know, the way, you know, things are normally perceived, you know, are named, you know, the way, no, you know, the way, you know, people make sense of things, give an interpretation of events, etc. So, which there is, you know, a normal order, which is the order of consensus, meaning, you know, everybody is in his or her place, you know. We know what things are, what they mean, you know, what are the causes, you know, of what happens, you know, and so, and there is a kind of there is a set of notions, you know, a set of arguments, you know, to describe the situation, etc., etc. And of course, if you are an artist, you know, interested in equality of intelligence, you try, of course, to counter, you know, the consensual way of describing the situation, of staging situations, and well, so which means to invent some kind of, I don't know if it is alternative or parallel words, but at the same time that are words for everybody, you know. And for me, really, when when it comes to the idea of community, I think the thing really starts with the very way we put words in common. You know, we put in common words and images, words and movements, etc., etc. So we try, and I think of myself rather as an artist, you know, because for me an artist means a researcher. Somebody who tries, you know, to restate, you know, the way we perceive things and situation, you know, and so to create some kind of new possible words. And so so I think I'm also an artist in that sense too, you know. And I would say, well, artists have to artists, you know, committed to equality of intelligence. They have to go on, you know. They try to create something new. They try to counter the normal order of things, the normal way of explaining things, of describing them. Well, and they go on, and for me, really, it's important, you know, because I think I always try to say that there are two things that artists should not do, you know. First thing, you know, is trying to anticipate the effects, you know, of the effects of their work, you know. And the second is trying, you know, trying to answer immediately, you know, to situations. No, I think for me, art is a process. It's a process of research, and well, there are moments when we show to an audience, we show to people in various ways, you know, the results of our research. And after that, you know, well, they can grasp it, you know, in their way, and prolong it in their way, you know. So, well, so of course, I think it's a kind of disappointing answer, you know, saying there is nothing specific, you know, to do now, but just, you know, but just going on, so just going on as researchers. It is very important, you know, because of course we can imagine that perhaps, you know, Of course, you live in the United States. I live in France, and and of course in France there are more subsidies, for art, from the government. And I can imagine, that there will be there can be programs, asking precisely artists, to engage with the situation, to engage with health, to engage with the pandemic, etc., etc. Well, and I think well, artists, as I think of them, as I like them, precisely should avoid this kind of trap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I don't think it's a disappointing answer at all. I think it's a very, very significant one, and something we all have to really listen to. And perhaps we don't do it enough. What you said, that you share research, you share the experience of the research, and that it is that struggle for equal intelligence. And I think theater, and especially theater in the United States, a lot of it is still, as you would say, done by the experts or by the elite. You know something, you teach something, you bring salvation, you pre-think everything, you do not leave it open. It is not distancing, as you would say, or it is not a neutral, open space for reflection and interpretation. I think what your article said and your work is to say that theater artists have to take spectators as equals, that you share that moment, but they are as important, and it is no longer good enough to watch, because looking itself is not knowledge, is not participating in knowledge, but you have to act, you have to find ways to also be engaged in that. And I do think our training in theater is that we are experts and we know more. But you say, no, you don't know more, right? You share, or do I understand that right?
Yes, but with at the same time, I think there is something that I would correct, but well, precisely, I say, that there is not, there is not, on the one side, action, and on the other side, people looking, and looking is not acting. Well, what I try to say in The Emancipated Spectator is, well, looking is also acting, so but we must get rid, of the old, of the old opposition, the idea that a spectator is passive. No, really, spectators are not passive. Because if spectators are passive, nothing happens. I think that theater is not only made by people who are on the stage, or are in front of an audience. Theater is also made by people, well, what at any time, make connections. I would say receive, not simply receive, what is said or what is what is shown, but also, well, translate it, in their own experience. Connect what they see, what they hear, well, with their experience, with their souvenirs, etc., their memories, etc. So, well, so this is the thing. So on which perhaps I made a diverge. From you, I think, but really, we must try only to, well, to suspend, all the oppositions, like ignorance, knowledge, activity, passivity, acting, looking, because precisely, I would say the inegalitarian, way of understanding intelligence, or the inegalitarian, common sense, is based on such opposition, and also, and I always try to say, no, there is no knowledge on one side, ignorance on the other side. Well, there are people, going from one form of knowledge to another form of knowledge, or there is no theory on the one side, practice on another side, but there are different, different intellectual acts, because practice is also made of intellectual acts, just as what is called a theory. And in the same way, there is no activity and passivity, and people being passive because they just sit, just in front of a spectacle, for me it's very, very important to get rid, of all these oppositions, because all those oppositions are also forms of hierarchy. And of course, it's difficult, but really, I think for people working, in the theater, for me, it's the same, as somebody like me who is supposed to work in theory. Well, we are researchers, which means that we try to make sense, of situation, to understand what happens around us, and we are artists, meaning that we try to create something, to create something solid, something resistant, something existing outside of us, because what I think is important, for me, this idea, that what we say, what we stage, must really become external. We are not the masters. We are not the masters, of our words. No, not the masters, of our plays, etc., etc. For me, it is something very, very, very important. Try to work without mastery.
Yeah, and this is and I think it sounds easily and that just but it's a radical concept. It's a radical sharing. It's a kind of a radical equality, and that he really says that the master director and the writer or the philosopher at the same level as the audience member, and they have shared knowledge, and they perhaps had different experiences and different opportunities. But we only will achieve, as you said, if I understand right, a sensory experience of the common world together if we find forms that are not hierarchical. And I think we in the theater world forgot that perhaps the theater itself is already an institution, is already a hierarchy. We have this Black Lives Matter movement, and the Dear Whites Theater. There's a big letter written by artists of color and indigenous artists said, we are not part of it. Your institution is already not open. It's hierarchical. You don't even see it. You don't understand it. They are demanding an access and an equality. And I think artists and art always has been on the right side of social progress. But I think what you could learn from you or what you said is that really that we have to understand that the way things are produced and the way things are artistically done already also represent a hierarchy. So the question is laws or changing an institution, does that change an aesthetic outcome, or do you think it has to be an aesthetic practice that changes or creates a new experience?
No, I think really it's a matter of practice, But I don't know. I don't know, of course, how old the history of the theater in the United States. But of course, I know better in France, And in France, there were several moments where there were attempts, to create new institution really oriented, to low people or common people, or the people of the lower classes, the people of the suburbs, etc., etc. And and of course it's important, but most of the time it failed. Most of the time it failed, And of course there are many reasons. But first, you cannot oblige people to like theater. You know? In the same way, you cannot oblige people to like art. You cannot oblige people, you know, to like philosophy. You know, so of course, if people don't like it, don't enjoy it, you know. Well, okay, that's it. I think the problem is, you know, we must try, you know, to think always only in sociological terms, you know, saying, but there are people, you know, that are excluded, you know, and we must try to include them, you know, but because there are people who simply don't want to be included, you know, and think so. But of course, that's the point. But we must respect this, you know, not think should every. Of course, we think that it would be wonderful, it would be better, you know, if everybody, you know, could enjoy theater, you know, enjoy art, may do art, etc. But we cannot oblige people. You can't oblige people, and we cannot really, you know, I would say, identify our perspective as artists, you know, with, you know, cultural governmental problems, you know, governmental programs, you know, governmental programs, you know. Well, I have this idea: people must go to the theater, but people must go to the libraries, etc. And that's fine, you know. But I think what we do, if I consider myself as an artist, you know, what we do is to make some proposals, you know, and people may get them, may adhere to them, or they, and well, and we try, and we try, you know, to I would say to invent, you know, our own way of practicing equality, you know, and it's really a job of every day. I would say a job also of any gesture, of any word, you know. Because I'm at every moment, you know, there is a question, you know, of how we conceive of equality. I give you a very simple example. And well, you know, when people like me, who are supposed to be philosophers, you know, are so invited, you know, to, for instance, to speak on radio and TV, you know, the first thing, you know, that of course a person who invites us says is, "Oh, please take care, you know, you must be simple, you know, you must be understood by everybody, etc., etc." Well, but I think it is supposed to be, you know, kind of respect for people, but not. It's the contrary. In fact, it's a form of despise, you know. I mean, when they say us, no words too complicated, be simple, etc. No. So, for instance, you know, usually I answer, you know, I see what I have to say, you know. I'm not making distinction, you know, between people who are between learned audience, you know, and ignorant audience, you know. I'm just in people, you know, like me, you know, who try to know a little more, to know different things. That's all. So this is an example, but at every moment, you know, there is not only simply a conflict. There is a conflict of equality and inequality, but a conflict, you know, that is played, you know, under the guise, you know, of a conflict between ways of understanding equality. You know, that's the problem, you know, and so well. Yes, I think it's mostly, you know, a question of practice, and it is a question really that really reappears, you know, at every moment, you know.
No, and I think it's as you say, it's a practice, and one has to find ways to practice that equality in a radical and serious way. I mean, for your example, what you did when it's about the history of capitalism or also communism, and instead of just looking what you're also a master at of theoretical text, if I understand right, you went and researched letters written by workers in 19th century. It almost sounds, in our terms, it's almost like documentary theater, or as Karl Marx says, the theater of the real. But So you went and said, I'll find an equality of thoughts, if I understand that right, of a Marxist writing or a writing of a French researcher in the Sorbonne, in the letters of a worker. Do I understand it right?
Yes, yes. I think so. Because when you are working on, the history of working class, you are supposed, to find some kind of documentary material, and then, normally, if you are a normal person or normal academic, so this is the material, and you have to explain the material, to say, okay, they say this, but we have to understand, why they say this, what is the reality, which is behind what they say, etc. And so, which means that normally, well, when we deal with this kind of documents, which are supposed to be popular, documents, well, you make a kind of a dividing line, with between two kinds of words, the words that are your material, and your own words, the words of the scientists, well, who explains the material, and what was for me important, is what I read those letters, and so written in the 1930s by workers, a joiner, a mason, etc. And well, and I got the impression, that they speak, the same way as the students, rebel students, of the 68 time, they are, they think, in the same way. They have the same kind of aspirations, the same kind of also of aesthetic capacity, they also like philosophy. They also like landscapes and beauty, etc., etc. Well, okay. So this is a testimony of equality, and I must, in a way, do the same thing, so no more being, the commentator, who says, oh, I find with this material, it's so exciting, and now I will try to tell you, what is the truth, behind this material. No, I tried really to create a level of equality by mingling, my own voice, with the voices of those workers. Well, and this is also what art means to me, in a way that we are all researchers. They were researchers. They were researchers, in search of a kind of a new form of life, of a new way, a new way, of being, on this, in this world, and well, as I am a researcher trying, to make sense of this, or rather, to make it perceptible, because equality precisely is not something self-evident. You have to show it, which means that we have to invent a form, to make it perceptible. So, of course, this is what I try to say about theater. The problem is not, how can we speak to everybody in a simple language? No, it is how can we create our own form of practice of equality.
Yeah, and that we all share, in a way, a new perspective of the world, a new interpretation, or perhaps more just one, a more truthful one. I know that in that 68 time in France, that you were on the side of the people on the street. Meanwhile, some people said, no, there needs to be a Althusser or mentor, and others said, no, there needs to be an elite that develops theories, and then something happens. Meanwhile, I'm from Germany. In Germany we had all these thinkers, but we had no real revolution, except as Thomas Oberender, who says, perhaps the street demonstration before the opening of the wall in Leipzig and Dresden and it's not being appreciated by the official history writing. They said, no, we helped and saved Eastern Germany, but actually they were the people on the street who did it. But you said that it is actually you have to be on the side of the movement, or you have to be on the side, or not of theory. Do I see that right? And
well, I think we are trying. I think that we must try, really to seize, every situation, I would say, from the angle of equality, from this angle, So, and so in 68 there was, of course, the Althusserian ideologies, we were equipped with, saying, wow, these students, they are petit bourgeois, petit bourgeois ideology, and petit bourgeois ideology, of course, serves the interests, of the bourgeoisie and capitalism, etc. So it's bad. Well, but so we had to learn from what happened, to learn from the practices, from the words, from the kind of events and the kind of situations, the kind of links, that were created at that moment. So, well, the point is, trying to find what is new in the situation, what at the same time in the situation, what is the egalitarian, the egalitarian aspect of the situation. That's why, I was interested by, all that happened, during the last 10 years, from the Arab Spring, to Occupy movements, etc., the squares movement, and the yellow vests in France, etc. Because, of course, many theorists say, but that is just spontaneity, it's petit bourgeois, it has no future, etc. Well, I'll always say, a future is not created by a kind of strategy. A future is created by your present, and the point is what happens in this present.
That is significant, yeah. To also say that the Black Lives Movement, what happens in the present, if we would read the emails of the Black Lives Matter, and someone perhaps will in 100 years from now, or in 5 or in 10, so to understand the moment, they will be a most significant contribution, and that the presence changes and not the theory. So you think a theory comes later?
No, I'm not saying there should be no theory, etc. No, I just say that what the whole history of the 20th century, taught us, is really the vanity, of all this idea, that the future is created by strategies founded on the knowledge of society. Well, the knowledge of society is always a certain knowledge of society, a specific knowledge of society, and there happens a moment where the knowledge of society, even the critical knowledge of society, is part of the normal life of that society. It is the same kind of thing, I said at the beginning about the intellectual forms of denunciation. So, we have a critical knowledge of our society, why it is bad, why of course there should be a revolution, and of course that revolution needs an avant-garde and a strategy, etc. Okay, but I think we have really experienced, that it doesn't lead anywhere, that it has no interest, and what is interesting is solely moments when equality actually happens.
Yeah, I remember from your talk on the archaeology of modernity, where you said the great invention of 20th century art was the collage, first by Russian filmmakers who put a street worker next to a pilot, next to farmers, next to people who connect telephone lines, and then the idea of collaging material. Would you say that perhaps now, in the 21st century, that the strive away from the center, from the master artist, but turn towards what you might say the real? We no longer have religious structures in that sense, aristocratic structures, but art was concerned with a lot. The idea of the reality, the workers' letters, the filmmaker from Portugal, the photographs. Do you think that the real this concentration and research shared on the real about the people and not from experts is that a tendency of our new century?
Well, I cannot really make any serious diagnosis about our century. Well, I don't think that I said that the collage was a great invention of the 20th century. But I try, of course, to think about the multiple encounters of art and life during that century, which means for me in fact encounter between various forms of art, because in a way for me this idea of art meeting life means that artistic forms as specific forms, specific activity, well, meet the artistic capacity that belongs to everybody. So when I spoke so about the films made by Pedro Costa with those migrant workers, I think this meeting between a filmmaker whose great models are American filmmakers like John Ford, and those migrants who have the ability to tell their story, to restage it, to replay it too. So I think that perhaps some very important moments in art are those moments really of meeting of forms of art that are supposed to be so far from each other. The moment when people, because what is interesting is not the fact that art gets into the streets, etc. Art gets out of the museums, out of the theaters, etc. That's not the most important. The most important is this moment when really forms of canonical art meet this capacity of our art that belongs to everybody. So well, for me this is what I think what I think interesting. I don't say this is what artists must do, because artists do just what they like, or they think that they do what they like, which is, of course, is different. But yes, so the same thing. I think we must get out of this kind of voluntary conception that we must go there, that we must make this conjunction, etc. No, we must not. We must look. We must look everywhere. And try to seize what really is interesting. What is new. And for me, but of course it's for me. What is new is always a new way of staging equality.
Yeah, and I think this is a very serious reminder. Our motto a little bit is from the Brecht quote that new times need new forms of theater, and I think your thought that to stage equality, to really intellectual equality, artistic equality, human equality, is and should be at the very center. And it was not, I think, in many forms, especially also in theater, and so especially the highly commercial theater in America. It is not. The idea is, a good production has 2,000 runs and or something, but in Berlin, after 20 shows, artists are already tired, or 25, they don't want to do it. But do you go to the theater? Do you enjoy going to the theater?
Well, I enjoyed when I was younger, now for personal reasons, it became harder for me to go to the theater. So, well, unfortunately now, well, most of art, most of art I see on the screen, but what perhaps there will be there will be a new time, when I'm able to go back to the theater. So, well, also it is true that at certain moments, I was a bit perhaps a bit angry, against against people in the theaters, because precisely they always wanted they wanted too much, they wanted too much to achieve some kind of a sense of theater, to a sense of theater, as I don't know, as a ritual, as a religion, I don't know exactly, but well, as I told, I did in France. In France, of course, that it is a country, where as there are, some subsidies for theater, so artists have to show, that they are concerned, concerned with real life, concerned with the community, etc. Well, and well, of course, it creates some kinds of attitudes, of people telling, but theater is so important. People cannot live without theater. So please give us money. Because people will not live. Will not live anymore, if you don't give us money. Well, of course, it's a caricature. It's not. Well, it's just a joke. But at the same time, there is a kind of tradition, of French, of considering theater and public theater as something so important, as being religious in itself or political in itself. No, I think, I don't want to repeat, to myself, to too many, too much, but well, we have to invent, we have not to think what is the essence of the theater, what is the kind of service that the theater, gives to society, and how can we achieve it. No, we have the idea of how we can combine words and images and movements, and sounds, etc. To create a line of equality, and we try, and let us try to create those lines of equality.
Hmm. What theater did you like? Is there a theater where you said,
Um,
what theater did, when you saw something, what did you like? Did you?
well, it's very it's very difficult. I cannot say, I like this or that form, or that form of theater. Well, I like. I like theater. When it surprises me, when it surprises me, and of course, many times I think, oh, okay, I know. Yeah, well, this is a kind of a new version, of art audience theater or Brechtian theater, or theater of cruelty, or okay, or theater of death. I don't know, but yes, I cannot say really. I like well. I'm very often asked, what artists do you like? What theater do you like? Usually I say no. I don't like, to give awards. To give prizes. It's really the surprise and the emotion of the events, that counts.
Hmm. Is there?
Sometimes I see something I was not, yeah, I was not expecting, something was not predictable, and I'm happy. That's all I can say.
Hmm. Yeah. So is there like a Brechtian? Did you see the Brechtian plays, or where you say these are?
No, I think now, but really, I don't want to pronounce judgments about this
Yeah.
or that, this or that, play or theater,
Yeah.
or playwright, dramaturgist. No, but well, I have always sense that of course there are some models, and people trying more or less, to mix to mix, so little coming from the Arthurian tradition, a little coming, a little coming from the Brechtian tradition, a little coming from the great, tradition of Soviet theater, or coming, from theater, some other lines, and so I've. As I said, I don't want, to
Yeah.
say, well, I like this, I hate that.
Mm. Yeah, so we are also coming closer to the end of the talk, and I remember you also said when a traditional art form, meets new technology, new media,
Yeah.
And I think you spoke about Louis Fuller, who was the dancer, and then she had invented the lighting system and the patterns. Right now, we have what we use now, the Zoom, there is the Facebook, there is the internet and all of it. Do you think this is going to be, there will be a new digital art, or is it already there?
It's very difficult, because by I'm not, well, of course, I know that there are many artists, saying I'm doing digital art, and etc. But at the same time, also, the internet, in fact, also serves just as a kind of surface, a surface, on which art, which is not digital art, is shown. So, and of course, now, we are in this situation, when so many things that normally happen, in theaters or in universities or in museums, just happen on screens. I don't think that this is really the beginning of a new form of art. Of course, there is digital art, I would say, which works as a kind of specific form of art. I would say, but I don't think, that the future of art, is forcibly digital art. I don't think so.
Did you watch digital performances, or do you right now in the time of the?
Well, sometimes, yes, sometimes, but well, for me, I would say that it is still art, really to really adhere to this. To this, I would say, to this kind of distancing, if I take my own case, well, when I am alone, well, of course, I write, when I speak, I like to speak with people, who are, really present, in the same space, and so we have these forms, of while speaking, through Zooms, etc. Well, it's for me, it's well, it's a kind of makeshift. I don't think for me it is a communication of the future. It is the way we are, and of course, I think that there are people, who think that it is the future, and especially if in education, because of course, if you can do, this kind of teaching from afar, of course, education will cost much less, and certainly I think that our government, thought that it was really nice. It was really nice, téléenseignement, teaching from afar, and certainly they will try, they will try, of course, to increase this kind of things. As for me, as I said, either you are alone, but you are, or you are with other people, and I'm not really happy, you know, in situations like the situations today. You know, though you know, I'm speaking, you know, with very nice people, certainly, but at the same time, it's not my normal way of speaking, you know. So for me, I hope it is not the communication of the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is interesting, and I think the research, you know, as you say, on equality most probably is within communities and will be within people, and by definition. And maybe towards the end is the last question. I wanted to thank also Amanda Gann, who is with us, who is here to help me in case I don't find the right words and she had to translate it into French, or if we were looking for someone. She's from the TDM trauma.
We're both doing great.
Yeah, in Boston at Harvard. So thank you for being with us. But Jacques, for that time, and you are also an artist, you say, you know, how do you use the time now? The time that perhaps is even more confinement than ever for you, and for young artists or our viewers, what do you think is of importance to keep in mind, or what is important to focus on?
I don't understand the question. You ask me what young artists, what's important for young artists?
What you think as an artist, you know, is of importance for this time of a confinement or a corona. How do you use it? You say perhaps, you know, later on something will come out. But for our viewers or for artists in general, how do you think this time of lockdown, this time of this catastrophe we're going through, what can one do to use it to be present?
I think one can use it to go on doing art, you know. I have I said I am an artist too, okay, but I have a son, you know, who is a musician, and of course the concerts were cancelled, you know. But at the same time, you know, the musicians, you know, went on working. They worked, of course, trying to to better their own performances. You know, they try to communicate. They try to make projects. You know, so you cannot make a concert, but you can try to record. You can try to invent a new program, you know, to make a record. You can make research, you know, find new works, you know. So I said because my son, you know, is mostly, you know, playing music from the 16th, 17th century, you know. So you can always, you know, find new works, experiment with new instruments, you know. So I think there is a possibility, well, to try to go on, you know, and of course, it's a bit different, certainly for a theater. You know, of course, you can play you can play the violin, you know, at home, you know, and okay, it's more difficult. It's more difficult for an actor, you know, for a stage designer, etc. But it's also a time for them, to invent, you know. And of course, what is lacking now is the moment of what Jacques calls verification, you know. So we are, you know, so we can be a researcher, you know, all the time, you know. That's true, you know. And certainly, you know, there is a lack, you know, from the point of view of verification, you know. And well, it's very difficult. It's very difficult, but there are ways. It's not perhaps not the same at this moment in the United States, you know. But well, artists try to make some you know, some little meetings, and of course with less of course less people, you know, etc. but well, it's also an opportunity, you know, to try to find new things, new ways of doing, I think.
Yeah, 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 and I think that is also a significant direction. Jacques Rancière, who you wrote about, you know, the ignorant schoolmaster, who someone who basically found out that you don't need to know anything to teach something, and then in order to learn something, also you don't need to know what you normally are taught by someone who is a master. So it's a significant, mostly really, really important book, especially for our field. That he said, yeah, you can learn anything, you can teach anything, you can teach painting, but you're not a painter. You can teach language, right? If you know two parts of it, you know, you can help that famous book, part was Flemish and part was French, you could learn from each other. So I think it is a time where you said, if I understand right, where one could try out things because the verification, you know, is not, then it also doesn't matter.
Yes, no, I did not say, you know, well, you can teach what you don't know, etc. Well, I said it, but with a very specific meaning, you know. But you don't know what you teach, you know. It is not simply the fact. Oh, you can teach everything, even, you know, not knowing it. No, it's well, even when you know, you don't. When you know, I know philosophy, you know art, etc. But you don't know the effect, but the effect, you know, that you create, you know, which is very important, you know. And for me, you know, it's which is one thing. The other thing is that you are always an ignorant, you know, an ignorant in some sense. So that it's not the fact that, you know, if you know, anybody can teach anything, you know, and that anybody can learn anything, you know. It is that, well, the master is always at the same time an ignorant, and the ignorant at the same time somebody who knows a lot of things, you know. And the meeting, you know, happens precisely at this point of conjunction.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a very important correction. Thank you. But still, it's a time perhaps to where one can reflect. And really, Jacques, thank you so much for joining us. And I know it is not your favorite way of communicating, and you work at the recipient. But for us, it was of real importance also to hear from you and see you, and to see that we share as human beings the same the moment, you know, of existence right now, and it really gives us an insight in your experience and how you connected. We at the Segal Center will have tomorrow here with us Morgan Jeunesse, who is a dramaturg who early on worked with Joe Papp and the Public Theater, and she will talk about her work and how her thoughts, and I think she's out now, a double-edged sword. We have an artist from Indonesia, Heli Minarti, will be with us and talk about her work in Jakarta and how it feels for her at the moment to be making art, create art, and to create networks or communities there. Dima Mata from Lebanon, artist, openly for queer artist, will talk what it means to be an artist in Lebanon at the moment, in Beirut, where things seem to be collapsing. They already were very difficult after civil war, and so we will get an update from her. And then the great Richard Schechner will come back. He is also preparing his special issue for TDR, for the magazine, and so many contributors also brought pieces with him. So he will also try to connect for us theater performance and the current moment and the unrest. So this is another week where we try to get some ideas and know even more how ignorant we really are and how very, very, very little we do know. So Jacques, really thank you for joining us and contributing to us. Amanda, for being there in case we needed you. And so this is very, very good. So what are you going to do now? You're going to have dinner in
Oh, not yet, not yet. I don't know. It will be the time, you know, for just for going to see the sea. But you know, but now there is a mist, you know. So I think I will stay home, you know. Perhaps have a drink, you know, with my wife, because it's not really the right time, you know, to go outside, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I hope it will get better. Again, really, thank you for taking the time, and I hope we didn't disturb your day too much.
No, not
And
at all. No, no, it was a play. It was a play. It was a pleasure. Thank
yeah,
you.
it was really important to hear from you, and inspiring, and also, you know, to underline that your research, what you do, is of real significance and is inspiring, and it really gave us a new perspective of the world, and it is much needed. So thank you all, and I hope to see our listeners again or hear from them again. And thanks to HowlRound for hosting us, and thank you all for joining. And goodbye, and thank you, and have a good drink.
Okay, goodbye. Goodbye.